If your student is in 10th or 11th grade right now, this might be the most important episode for you to listen to. Here's why. Most families wait until senior year, until those financial aid offers arrive in March and April to understand how college costs actually work. By then, college lists are already built, applications are already submitted, and families find themselves trying to decode complex financial aid letters in 72 hours sometimes, while their students are emotionally attached to schools that they might not be able to afford. That's in crisis mode, and it leads to expensive decisions made under pressure. But when you understand financial aid offers before your student applies, when you know what to look for and how to compare, and what questions to ask, everything changes. Your college lists reflect financial reality from the start. Your family has realistic conversations about affordability, and when the offer arrives, you're reading them with confidence, not confusion. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Moments That Matter podcast. I'm Laura Escamilla. So in our last episode, we talked about why families feel blindsided by college costs, even when they think that they did everything right. We discussed how sticker price isn't the real cost and why timing matters more than most people realize. So this season, we're focusing on helping you understand how everything works, and when it's time to make those decisions, parents don't feel pressured. So today we're building on that, and we're going to talk about financial aid and financial aid offers. So in the first episode, we talked about college affordability. It's not just money, it's about timing and information and understanding the system before all these emotions take over. So today we're going to apply principles to financial aid offers specifically. So here's what happens to families. Families focus on getting their students into college.
Okay.
Admissions. They focus on grades, test scores, applications, essays, and all of that matters. But very few families spend the same amount of time understanding how they're actually going to pay for college. And we get this more than most people because we've been through this. So I'm not just speaking from the outside in, and the families that I've talked to, we're looking at this from our own experience as well. So, you know, these financial aid letters, even though the students have applied in August, September of their senior year, they don't get these financial aid letters till March and April. That acceptance letter comes and financial aid offer comes later. So when families are trying to learn this new language, compare numbers that they don't understand or don't seem comparable, making decisions worth thousands, tens of thousands of dollars.
Yes, indeed.
All a matter of weeks while students are emotionally invested already into where they want to go to school. And that's really hard as a parent to tell your student at that point, you can't afford it.
You don't want to let anybody down.
And when I've talked to some students through the research process talking about how they felt could that happen, that they had to go to a different school, how they felt, how they carried a little bit of resentment towards their parents for not telling them sooner before they put in all the effort, right, to apply to these schools. So today we're going to talk about that process, and we're not going to wait until the student applies. We're not going to wait until offers arrive. We want to understand now how financial aid works and how offers work. So the very first thing we want to talk about in this episode is not just financial aid, how to talk about free money and borrowed money and how two schools have this same total amount of aid, but it means something completely different.
Okay.
So we want to, this isn't about becoming like a financial aid expert. This is just about understanding enough, early enough to be prepared. So the first thing about financial aid offers, let's talk about what they are not. They are not reward systems. They're not rewards. They don't say that your student is good or a good person or a good student. Financial aid offers have nothing to do with that. They're not random, and they're usually not negotiable. I mean, just to say it nicely, like This is what the school's offering. This is what they can do. And in future episodes, we can talk about appeals and that kind of stuff, but rarely does that work. Usually when you get that offer, That's what it
That's
means.
it. This is what they're going to offer you, and
Right.
compare your offers between other schools.
Right. Financial aid is just a math problem, right? That they fill in with your family's data and they figure out this is not somebody sitting behind a desk saying, oh, I like this student and I'm going to give them this much or that much. They're not saying their other kid went to school here. We're going to give them as much as we gave the first kid. That's not how it works. It's data determined by the school. It's FAFSA information. So it's your family's income and assets, household size, the number of kids in college, depending on the school, because FAFSA doesn't determine that anymore, but the school does sometimes. Right. And that SAI that we talked about. And then we'll go into more detail in the next episode when we're talking about FAFSA.
Okay.
Next, it is stuff with your student's admission application, GPA, test scores, class rank, all that kind of stuff that could determine merit scholarships, right? That's the free money part. That goes into consideration too. Then it is affordability policies, because the school has students that they want to prioritize what they can afford. Some schools set out to meet full need and some don't. So knowing what schools do that is important because they're not all going to do that. And also federal and state eligibility guidelines. If the student qualifies for Pell, Texas grants, state residencies, depending on where they're going to school. Right. So the financial aid offer is all of those things combined. So why does this matter? Because when you understand that it's a formula, you don't take it personally, right? You're not offended by what they've sent you. And I see a lot of parents doing just that, feeling offended because they're like, my kid's a good student. And of course, every parent, I think that my students, my kids are like phenomenal candidates for any school, would be lucky to have them. And they should be given the world.
I agree.
But the truth is that every student that's applying to those schools are good candidates. So it's not to be taken personally or offended by because they didn't give you what you think your child deserves. And what we want to do, it's not about your family's worth or your student's value. They are just formulas. They're just mathematical problems that the school's putting in. Right. And that's similar for our scholarship. We do the same thing. It is just data. We take the data from their application and we score them because that's the fairest way. That's to avoid people deciding I like this person or this. It's the fairest way is just to take the data and process it and help as many students as you can.
That's the goal, right? Help as many students as you can.
That's what
with your scholarship as well as every university.
School. Yeah.
Right? They want
every school wants to use all the funds they have and they want to help as many students as they can. Right. So and that's what
these
their
are the systems they have in place that do that. And it's not personal. It's just an algorithm that decides, that determines.
Right. So when you understand that, you can start focusing on the things that the student can control. So when they apply to FAFSA, when they're doing, scholarships, merit aid, looking at profiles and stuff, you start to try to figure out what you can control because you can't control what the school policy is.
Or how much money they have available.
Or what they have. So financial aid isn't something that happens to you. It is just something that is part of the process.
And again, it's an offer, correct? This is an offer. We can offer you this much.
And
other universities
you can say no and go somewhere else.
Right.
That's the most important part is that you want to make sure also through this process that your student has options, that they're applying to several schools so that you can, figure them out. And the sooner you understand that that's the process, you stop being like emotionally attached to it, or again, being offended or taking it personally. It's not about, you personally.
Yeah. It sounds like it'd be really heartbreaking for someone who's really hoping to go to a specific school. And I know that a lot of students grow up wanting to go to a specific school for a specific reason. And it doesn't always work out, but that's okay. I mean, you can definitely get a quality education and pursue your dreams somewhere else. And I guess the lesson is keep that in mind as you're looking at these different offers and do what's best.
Yeah. So the most important thing is, why are these things so confusing? You need to break down this financial aid award letter, right, that you get. And when our first kid was going to school, I understood the differences, and I helped a lot of friends try to help figure that out for their kids, because it looks great, right? You can say, oh, my kids, they got $23,000 offered to them in help and financial aid assistance. And
Sounds
it's
great.
like, wow, $23,000. That's incredible. But then you start looking at the breakdown, and let's say that it's 8,000 in scholarship, merit scholarship, 3,000 Pell Grant, 3,000 in work study, 3,500 in a subsidized loan, 2,000 in unsubsidized loan, and 3,500 parent plus loan. That's what $23,000 is. So when you break it down, free money of that is only 11,000. The free money.
Right. The rest of it you're going to have to pay back.
And work study at 3,000 is earned money. That's potential to earn it. Your kid still has to do the work and show up for the hours.
Right.
And through the whole year before that comes to fruition. So those are things to think about. And then, you know, the borrowed money, you're talking about the subsidized, the unsubsidized, the parent plus loan, that's what you have to borrow. So on that 23,000 they've offered you, they're asking you to borrow 9 of it. So now you're not at 23,000. You want that 23,000 to look like free money. And sometimes they can, and sometimes they can't, but you really want to look at what that is. You want to break down what you're borrowing and what is free to you and you're going to have to pay back. Definitely. And also when you're looking at those offers, is it for 1 year? Is it for 4 years? What are the requirements of keeping that free money? So these are all things you have to consider and think about your student. If the requirement is a 3.5 GPA, do you think your kid can keep that 3.5 GPA? That's a lot of pressure sometimes.
And granted, they've never done this at the university level before or college level.
Right. You're thinking about them
the way
as
they
high
operate
school
in
students.
high school, how
Right.
well they can perform in high school.
Right. So the real question is, how much free money are we getting from this school? And how much do we need to pay out of pocket? How much do we need to borrow? So this is part of the process of doing this. So in my research, I have talked to a lot of families that felt blindsided. I mean, they thought their kids were going to get more money. That was what they were counting on. They had a smart kid. They really thought this merit part, this free money was going to be more.
Right. Cover that gap.
And sometimes they feel like, because I'm living paycheck to paycheck and I'm just surviving, I am in need of more help.
Sure.
They think that's automatically going to get them, qualifies them for help. But the numbers say something else. And that's what it is. That's what the calculation is based on the Department of Education or the school. And you can't change that. And even though you feel like you need the financial help, the numbers may show you don't. And that's just the reality of the situation.
That's how it works.
Families are usually operating with this incomplete information. So it's not that they're doing something wrong, because nobody sits down and explains it. Unfortunately, college readiness professionals and counselors don't have time to sit down and explain every single thing. That's why there's resources like this, like what we're trying to provide, so that parents can understand and find other ways to do this on their own to figure this out. Because we figured it out on our own.
Yes, for sure.
I mean, I was fortunate to come from the industry to understand certain things, but we just figured it out on our own. And with our second child, it was a little easier because we understood it from the first.
That's right. So is there a strategy that parents can follow to make themselves look like they would require more aid? There really isn't, right? I'm thinking of universities and colleges that will offer you free tuition so long as you make under a certain amount of money. But that's not really going to be a realistic goal, to set yourself up to make less money.
Right. And you also have to understand that all of these programs, FAFSA, for example, that they're looking at, if you start to determine today, okay, I need to do this, right? I'm going to only work this much or whatever. If you're trying to find,
let's say under $100,000.
Right. If you're trying to fall within that, we know somebody who didn't take on additional duties and overtime to try to stay in a certain.
We do.
income bracket for their kid to get tuition assistance programs. Right. And that, is a strategy to work if you know what schools are offering it and that your kid is applying to them. And the thing is that you have to keep up with that, because when your kid applies, it could change the next year. This year it could be 100, next year it could be 95, depending on the school's policies. And also remember that FAFSA doesn't go off of current year. It goes off of 2 years prior your income. Mm-hmm. So you're already working. You already did it. Right. You can't change.
That's not a reliable strategy.
Right.
Try to keep yourself within a lower threshold.
Right. So if you already did it, you can't go back and change that. And that FAFSA is calculating old income, right, that you already went through. So the reality is that many middle-class families don't qualify for significant need-based aid like Pell Grants or state grants. As a result, loans and work, study, things like that become a larger portion of what that financial aid offer is. So in that 23,000 case, it could be that 5,500 is what the student can get, and then maybe 15,000 is the parent plus loan.
Right. So to cover that gap, and the gap we're covering is the cost of attendance. That includes everything, correct?
So it might look like, again, oh, my kid's getting 20,000 in aid, but when you break it down, 14,000 is loans. That's not aid, that's debt, right? That's something you have to pay back.
You're agreeing to take on $14,000.
So you need to understand these categories as you're going through it. You might be fine borrowing that money. We borrowed money to help our kids.
Yes, of course.
That is sometimes the only option, and that's totally fine. But you need to understand that when it comes through and that award, financial aid award.
Every family's situation is going to be different, and you have to do what's best for your family and your finances.
Right. So we need to also talk about the cost of attendance. This is a very big word, that cost of attendance. You're going to hear it at every school, see it at every time you break it down, because this is where families make mistakes on where they're trying to understand. So they fixate on just tuition, how much the tuition is at the school, but there are other expenses that are added on to these bills that they're not planning on. Right. So there's tuition and required fees that you can't just say you're not going to pay. They're part of what goes along with it. They're part of the sticker price. Right. There's housing and meals, and you might say, my kid doesn't need to buy the meal plan, but they do. It's required. The school requires it freshman year that you buy the meal plan, whatever that looks like. Right. So housing also, they might be required to live, if they go out of your area, they'll be required to live in a dorm freshman year. They can't live with
some universities.
Yeah, a friend that they already know that has an apartment or whatever. So these are required things that you can't negotiate. They also have, in cost of attendance, they consider books and supplies. So that varies widely between majors, what your kid's studying, if they're engineering or science.
Correct.
Majors, those books are expensive. Those things are expensive that you have to calculate, and they need them. They're not given to them. They have to buy them. Then you're talking about transportation, right? Are you driving? And they include a cost of attendance in the bracket of transportation and under cost of attendance, right? And those things are not necessarily on your bill, but you do have to think about those things as part of your expenses for your kids. So whether they're going to drive 20 minutes to their college, that's gas that you have to consider, or they're going to fly cross country to get to school at the start of the year and at holidays and back home for spring break or whatever that is. You have to consider that when you're looking at your prices. So they do estimate a transportation cost and the cost of attendance depending on where the school is. So that'll be higher if your school is most likely like a school they're traveling to and they don't live in the area.
Correct. Many states away.
And then they consider personal and miscellaneous expenses. So that's like clothing and phone bills, things like that. And that, again, they're estimating it under cost of attendance. So they give you this big price, right? This is the cost to go here. But not everything shows up on your bill. And that is the maximum amount of aid or loans, whatever that is, that financial aid, it will never exceed cost of attendance. Whatever that's determined to be by the school, your financial aid letter award will never exceed that amount. You cannot borrow more than that amount. So it's important you understand what the cost of attendance is at that school.
And that's not negotiable. That's predetermined.
Non-negotiable, right. So we're talking about the first week of classes. Let's talk about a student that is in the engineering program, right? So they need a specific calculator, maybe $200. They need a lab coat, safety goggles, another $75, 3 textbooks, $400, and they need to commute 40 minutes away. Parking permit, those range anywhere from $300 to $1,000, depending on the school per semester. And 3 weeks in, find out they need a laptop. And we talk about this a lot. We mentioned it in the workshop that we got our son a Mac when he went off to college, and he got in 2 weeks, into the semester, and he couldn't use it. For his business classes, he needed a regular PC laptop.
So just for context, he needed that special laptop for one specific class. He could use his MacBook for everything else, and he preferred to very much. Right. But he did need that one tool, that one PC laptop to run one specific application that was only available on a PC for that one class.
So there we go, spending money we didn't plan to spend.
And it was required. He needed to run that application on a Windows
Right. So these expenses, we're not talking about luxuries, right? We're not talking about,
required to pass
these are all required for class. So where a student might maybe get a full tuition scholarship, which is amazing, and it saved the family thousands of dollars, but in that first semester easily had to scramble for $2,000, $3,000 for these other unexpected costs, right? Yes. So these are things that you should always process as they're trying to figure out where they're going and what they're going to need. There's always going to be something unexpected.
Right.
Always. Printers die, countless amount of emergencies we've had to fix as our kids went through college. So this is why we're talking about timing matters. So like the more you understand ahead of time what that looks like, if your kid wants to stay in the area, or if they want to stay in the state, or if they want to go out of state, you have to think about these things, what that's going to look like. What is it going to look like if there's an emergency for your kid that you have to fly there to see them or help them or whatever, all these kind of things. And you don't want to think about worst case scenarios, but you need to think about every scenario when you're going through these. So first, what costs are fixed and what are estimated. So when you're going through this, tuition and fees are fixed costs.
Okay.
You're going to pay that amount. I think most universities are shifting to any classes above 12 hours. It's a cap on tuition costs, but you need to know that. So in that case, that's the case for the university our kids went to. So we push them to take 15 hours, 18 hours, because it costs the same as 12. So they might as well take advantage of that. But that's not the case at every university.
It's not. And also with the understanding that you can't take on an unreasonable amount. You can get maybe a couple more classes, but don't take on more.
You have to know your kid. You have to know what that looks like. So personal expenses that are listed on the cost of attendance, those are estimated. Sometimes they're way too low. The school does the best to average out what that looks like. So those are estimated costs. So room and board is also an estimate, because depending on the room, the building, the situation that your student picks to live in, that changes that amount.
And that's something that I didn't realize until we got to college, is that different dorms are different prices, because some of them are a lot nicer than the others.
Yeah, some are newer.
And nobody wants to stay at the old dorm at the bottom of a hill that just looks really sad.
And sometimes there's a community bathroom instead of a private bathroom or a shared bathroom. So depending on your kid, you have to know that cost is
right. Know your student. Right. There are levels.
Yeah.
You're
and there are, that room and board is on the bill, but it's an estimate and it could change based on the dorm that your student picks.
You might bring it down.
And the same, with meals plans, depending on the school, do you need 7 days or 5 days? Or do you want to include the weekend or just weekdays?
Of meals.
Other schools do numbers of meals.
Right.
So it just depends. And with our daughter, we did 7 days because we wanted her to be covered. But the second semester, we switched to 5 days because she wasn't going on the weekend.
Right.
And with our son, we did 5 days, and then he needed to change to 7 days. So
every student is different.
These are just estimates, but they are on your bill, right? So then you want to talk about, your student situation. So again, an engineering major, their textbooks and supplies will cost more. Pre-med students will have lab fees added to courses and other things that they have to do. Architecture, art majors are hundreds of dollars in supplies that they need additional. If they're living at home, transportation to go to school, parking passes, all those things. And there's a lot of students who may not already have their own laptop, or not have their own computer, or not have all of these one-time costs, sometimes even appropriate clothing, where they're going. For living in Waco, they need to be prepared for rain. Maybe 8 out of 10 times it's raining. So raincoats and rain boots and umbrellas and all kinds of things that we don't live with in our area.
And definitely colder winters than deep South Texas.
So these are all real costs.
Right.
But they're real expenses you have to think about. And then there's expenses that are paid up front versus over time. Again, tuition is paid by semester. You need to make sure you have that money in August, in January. Books, they need that first week of class each semester. And transportation, again, you have to plan throughout the year.
Yes.
Hotels, you have to plan, understanding that cash flow and what your family can afford and when they can afford it. So these are the areas that families need to focus on so they're not surprised by costs also. Now we're going to talk a little bit about cost of attendance at different universities when they're looking at them. So this is something that I do show in the workshop, like visibly on screen. So you're looking at a local university might run you 10,000 tuition. You're doing 1,000 fees, 1,500 books and meals, transportation, and have a total cost of attendance of 15,800, let's say. And then there's a state school. They're going to leave home, leave the valley, go to a state school. State schools are the UTSAs, the A&Ms, UTs, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Those are state schools. Those are state funded. They have to follow certain regulations. And let's say that a state school, because they have housing and that kind of stuff included, their tuition's usually a little higher than a local university. Now you're looking at $31,000 for cost of attendance at a state school. And then you have somewhere like Baylor, tuition is higher, everything seems more expensive, and you're looking at $60,000. So those are big differences. But then when you break down the assistance that the schools are giving you, that's when you have to look at the big picture, right? Don't just look at the tuition at the school. Look at how much aid, because the local university may not provide any aid. So that is all out of pocket.
Right.
A state school, many state schools, and I just had a student who I talked to that got into UT, which is amazing because it's very difficult to get into that school. And you have to be really highly ranked. A lot of kids want to go there. And that's the biggest thing, is that they don't offer merit scholarships to students. Very rarely do they offer a scholarship unless it's a specific kind of program.
It's usually for a specific program.
Yeah, a specific program. But they don't just give free money because they don't need to. Because kids want to go there. If your kid can't afford to go there, there's another kid waiting in line who can go there.
It's true.
So these are things that are very important when you're looking at it. So when you're looking at all these costs, you have to break down the type of aid that they make available. So all of these schools have this on their website. They have the costs. They tell you exactly what is available. So when you look at your regional school, your state school, your private school, One school allows a student to live at home. One school will require the student to live on campus the first year. Neither of these are wrong, right? So it's just about what your family can afford to do, but you want to make sure that you are putting your expenses in the right place. One of them might have higher tuition than the other. So you're just looking at tuition. You might think, oh, this one's only 1,000 more, but look at the other costs. Look at how much it costs for room and board, how much it costs to have an apartment if they have to live off campus. These are things that you also have to consider. The biggest thing is that parents just look at tuition when they're looking at schools. They need to look at cost of attendance. That is like major mistake that is made. They go, oh, it only costs this much to go here, but they think that the other things are optional, and they're not.
I understand. I mean, I did the same thing when I left for school.
And you're like, it only costs $10,000 to go there, and this school costs $11,000, but the $10,000 school also has room and board and like all these requirements. So look at the full picture. So cost of attendance is what parents need to be comparing.
And I did it on my own, and I just felt like I could figure the rest out later. And, and it was challenging.
Yeah. You didn't always figure it out later.
No, I didn't always.
So this is why families need to understand the cost of attendance before they build these college lists and make better decisions based on the big picture, the whole picture. So they're not surprised when they get these financial aid letters back, because the financial aid award is going to be based on cost of attendance. So even if a student qualifies or gets full tuition covered, like these tuition assistance programs that we're talking about, they only cover tuition.
Right.
There's still the other stuff that has to be paid.
That's correct.
So even if they go away to a state school that provides this and they qualify, it just covers tuition. They still need to cover room and board and dining and all the other stuff that's in the cost of attendance. So understanding what the cost of attendance is, that's where we need to start focusing as students are considering schools, making realistic decisions for themselves.
So would you recommend parents put together a little spreadsheet that breaks down the cost of attendance and what everything costs, and compare campuses that way, just so they can visualize?
Yeah, we started talking about the cost of college and what students need to start focusing on. The spreadsheet is key. Start looking at it so you can compare on a list right in front of your face, black and white. This school is this much, this school is this much. And make a note. Do they require the student to live on campus? Do they require the student to have meals and all that stuff that is in the cost of attendance? And schools have to be transparent about what is in that cost of attendance. These aren't hidden things.
Right.
Anybody can find them. So another term that has to be understood in financial aid process is unmet need. So unmet need is the gap between what the college costs and what financial aid covers. So let's talk about a state school. Cost of attendance is $28,000.
Okay.
Financial aid is offered at $18,000. So unmet need is 10 from that.
Okay.
So that financial aid offer, though, is a grant. It is loans and it is work study. So you are borrowing already in that financial aid offer. And even with that, there is still $10,000 of unmet need.
I'm short. 10,000.
You're short. So this is where the family has to come through and cover. So you would have to do that through your current income, monthly payment plans that you can make payments monthly to cover that. Maybe you have a savings set up that this will come out of. And then other options are outside scholarships. That's where you start looking for money externally, like STAR Scholarship that is not affiliated with the school. The Merit Scholarship that is offered through the school has nothing to do with it. You're looking for other organizations not affiliated with the school to start helping cover that unmet need.
Okay. Are there some caveats with that, though, as far as merit scholarships and an outside scholarship? Because some universities will let you aggregate scholarships and
Right.
others will not.
So we will talk about that in a later episode about stacking scholarships. So that is also something
That's an important caveat.
Has to be considered.
Right.
And just quickly, that means that if a school gives you a merit scholarship and you receive another merit scholarship, the school will just reduce their portion to cover it. They're not going to add up all the scholarships.
Right. You can't utilize both.
But there are many scholarships that don't send the money to the school at all. The school will never know about it. There's little scholarships for 1,000 here, 500 here, local scholarships that will give you a check, and the school will not count it because they'll never see it. You get that money and you use it towards
your education,
the education, to fill this unmet need. And there are scholarships that just cover unmet need, that just look at your financial aid offer, and what they give you is the unmet need portion. So I know Vamos does that. So they're going to give you what you're missing to fill that gap.
I didn't know that.
So those are scholarships you want to look at, but of course you have to qualify, apply, and do all the things. Then there's, additional loans. So the student maxes out their federal loans pretty quickly because they're capped, and we'll discuss that in another episode of what that looks like. But then there's the parents that they have to start looking at loans, either parent plus loans or private loans. And again, another episode will focus specifically on loans, but that is also part of what can help fill that unmet need. So what this means is they've calculated FAFSA, and based on the formula, that student aid index, in our next episode will focus on FAFSA, they have established that the family has the capacity to contribute $10,000. So that means that the school's aid will only be up to that amount.
Okay.
They won't cover that $10,000. That unmet need is what FAFSA has determined the family can do out of pocket.
Right. Based on their calculations.
Based on the calculations. So the school will never offer more than that. So you can borrow money and apply it to the aid, but those are additional things you have to do. Their financial aid letter award won't max that out. And there are families that can't contribute anything. So that means the school is going to work to help them fill that completely. But unfortunately, for most of us, that's not the case. So this is where the disconnect happens. In my research, parents are like, we realized that we didn't discuss if we could afford it, right? Assumed they would get help. We assumed our kids were great and they would get what they needed.
Right.
So families need to start actually looking at the college's formula. They have a net price calculator. Every school has a net price calculator on their website that you can go in and fill out as best as you can to figure out where your unmet need is going to be and what that looks like. And once the school and FAFSA processed everything, they've determined you're going to be able to afford this much. And that's where it stays.
Okay.
But they're not looking at your reality. Let's just be clear. You can't call the school and say, I can't afford that because I have 2 other kids. I have medical expenses. We're already living paycheck to paycheck. The school can only work with the numbers they have. That's it.
And those numbers that they have are based on your FAFSA submission. Mm-hmm. And that is it.
That is it. And you can't call and plead with them because, again, to be fair to every student that applies, everybody has to be calculated on the
exact same
process formula.
Correct.
So even though it might be true that you don't have that money, even though it probably is absolutely true, you're already just trying to get through. It doesn't matter to the school. What it says on the paper is what they have to go by. So we have to look at this perspective, right? Understanding student aid index, which again, in the next episode, we're going to go through FAFSA and explaining that and how it's determined and what to really understand. But you also have to understand this is where the outside organizations that you have to also start compiling a list of these nonprofit organizations like STARS that helps you fill this need. Mm-hmm. And the sooner you do that and start gathering information, the better. I was just at an event on Thursday handing out information, and I'm telling the student that their senior year, they would apply and they're like, oh, I'm a junior, and they put it down and walk away. But they have to start planning and getting a game plan together and understanding this. It's not to be left for senior year.
Start putting together that spreadsheet.
Yeah. And the second you hear about something, that you see a commercial or somebody mentions their kid got this scholarship, find out what it is, where they applied, and
absolutely
what criteria they had, and
find out if that opportunity is available to you.
Yeah. And then also let's keep in mind, for example, just to talk about my work a little bit, STARS requires the student have 12 college hours.
That's correct.
So those hours, they need to start those their sophomore year and
Right.
junior year. They can't get to senior year and be like, oh, I didn't take dual. I didn't take AP.
It's just not possible.
You just
Not
can't do
likely.
anything. Yeah. So it's too late. So if you start compiling this list freshman year, sophomore year, you know what you need to do to prepare to apply for it your senior year. No, you're not going to get that money your sophomore year, but you can start a game plan to make yourself eligible
You certainly can.
for it your senior year. So these are things that have to start happening early. So let's bring it all together. We want to really focus on 3 different types of schools that are available to students, right? So there's state schools that are state funded.
Right.
There's private schools that are privately funded. And then there's regional community colleges that are usually near your house, driving distance. And all of those things look different. All of the cost of attendance looks different. You want to start focusing on those types of schools and the type of aid that they offer
Yes.
to schools. Do they offer merit aid, free money? Will they reward my student for specific scores, grades, rankings? Start figuring that out.
That's right.
Because at a private school, which has been our experience and we preach about it all the time, it would look exactly the same for our kid to go to Baylor as it would have for them to go to UT Austin. Very same.
Right.
Because of that merit scholarship. So don't just look at tuition costs.
Right.
Look at the big picture. Look at the full picture. And again, schools are very transparent to tell you how many of their students are on financial aid or get assistance.
Yes.
But look at how many students get merit scholarships, free money. You're not looking at how many get financial aid because that includes loans. You're looking at how many students get scholarships. So free money that can help. So
It's an important distinction.
it's a big distinction. Also, how many students get work study? Our kids did not do work study or did not accept that portion because it was something that they had to accrue throughout the year. It wasn't
That's right.
immediate. So we needed their things to be paid immediately. So you want to be looking at those 3 different types of colleges, what the cost of attendance is, look at their net price calculators, input what you can, and see what happens, see what that looks like, and start keeping lists, a spreadsheet. And I will put a sample spreadsheet on our website.
Great.
As you're making these decisions, when you're looking at financial aid letters, you want to start determining free money versus borrowed money. How much merit do they offer? Grants, how many students receive grants, and that type of thing, and how many are getting just loans. So that's financial aid. So we want to start focusing on that. And this matters. You don't want them to start applying to schools and putting that work in because it's a lot of work applying to schools that you can't afford.
Right. You need to get the full picture.
Right. Before. And remember that students start applying for colleges August of their senior year. So you got to know before.
You definitely do.
And have the conversation. Again, and I say it all the time, tell your kids if you have money saved. I didn't know if my parents had money to help me with. And I don't think our kids knew if we had money to help.
No.
That's something that we've learned through this process. Have the conversations. Let them understand and know. And what is there available for them. And how to, start looking at these schools. Include your students in this process. Let them be aware. How much debt do they want to graduate with, or do they think they're going to have debt? Do they understand what that means? And if they don't, and they don't want it, then you have to pick a school where you're not going to need to borrow anything. So that's a conversation before they've applied to the school, before they've fallen in love with the school.
Right. And the scenario you're talking about would be difficult if they got into the school they dreamt of going to and realized that it was just unattainable financially. That would be heartbreaking.
Yeah. So run through those net price calculators for all the schools, figure out what's feasible for you before the student starts applying to colleges and falls in love with the school, because that's the hardest thing, right? Nobody wants to tell their kid that they can't have what they want.
Nobody wants to do that.
Or what they work for. And the parent doesn't want to live with that guilt, right? Either. Let's just put it out there.
Yeah.
So we want to start planning ahead. We want to start keeping a list and understanding cost of attendance, free money, merit, aid, what that unmet need is, what the parent has to start putting in out of pocket and what that looks like for you. Run that net price calculator on these universities and start keeping track of what that is. Again, the next episode, we're going to focus on financial aid, FAFSA, understanding what that looks like. We want to start building a college list, understanding what the cost of attendance is at all these schools, and being strategic about it. Start figuring out what you can do. You want to avoid that last minute pressure to borrow because you feel you have to. Yeah. That's the only way. You don't want to leave financial aid decisions to the very end and not knowing what it all means. So for this week, we're going to start that list and we're going to start running these net price calculators so that when we start talking about FAFSA next week, we're understanding what that looks like for different schools, what schools are requiring.
That sounds good.
So if your student is in 9th or 10th grade right now, we want to start making these plans and looking at these scholarships. And of course, if your student is a junior right now, they really want to run and start looking at the costs before they start applying in August, because that's 7 months away. It's coming fast. And if you're a senior and you're really not figuring out what this is, hopefully this helped understand what that financial aid letter that's coming in a month or two means for you, and you have a plan. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment on our Spotify or on our website, and we will work on getting more information for you. But we will see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.